I'd also like to thank Councillor Nathan Zamprogno of the Hawkesbury City Council, who's been very helpful in formulating this initiative, and Councillor Mark Hornshaw. Mr President, I rise today to promote the establishment of a select committee on rural housing and second dwelling reform. New South Wales is in a housing crisis, which is appalling considering we have so much land in this space, in this state. Property prices forever accelerate and so do rents. Young families struggle to buy a home in the communities they grew up in, which creates distance. Many families would prefer to allow elderly parents to live close to them, but with a degree of independence and dignity. If we can encourage families to be geographically closer, then that will reduce demand for aged care systems and childcare. The current rules make it difficult to build a second home on rural properties. We have governments at every level wringing their hands talking about affordability, while the simplest, lowest cost reform is sitting right in front of us. That reform is getting out of the way and letting rural property owners build a second residence. This isn't a handout, it's not a subsidy, it's not a high-rise, it's rural property owners saying, just let us build. And the solution isn't in some glossy planning report, it's sitting on hundreds of thousands of paddocks across New South Wales. What's missing is a series of minor but impactful regulatory and legislative changes that this inquiry will consider. Let's empower rural landowners to build a second residence. Obviously, some rural landowners won't be interested. But as a country boy originally, I'm pretty sure many will relish this opportunity. This opportunity will increase the value of their land, likely provide some rental income, let seasonal workers stay on site and keep families closer. It will also spur local industry with an increase in demand for building supplies, etc. But all good reform needs to be carefully thought through, and that is why we need an inquiry to get the details right. This inquiry has the primary task of assessing the draft model instrument State Environmental Planning Policy Rural Housing Amendment Second Dwellings 2025. The draft instrument is designed to 1. Liberalise second dwelling construction on rural zoned properties RU1 to RU6 without subdivision. 2. Permit second dwellings as complying development in all rural zones. 3. Remove requirements for second dwellings to be attached to the principal dwelling. 4. Eliminate size limits, allowing second dwellings to be either smaller or equal or larger than the principal dwelling, and potentially function as the primary dwelling. 5. Relax or remove distance restrictions. 6. Allow second dwellings on properties above a specified elevation or outside 1 in a 100-year flood zones. 7. Flexible legal title arrangements, e.g. tenants in common, strata title agreements without subdivision. There are more than 250,000 rural lots over 5 acres in this state. This reform could directly affect over 350,000 citizens. It has economic benefits, environmental safeguards and rising public support, as demonstrated in the Port Macquarie and Hawkesbury LGAs, where local initiatives are exploring similar solutions. The measures are low cost, bipartisan and long overdue. This instrument gives property owners the dignity of choice over their assets. Under the current planning straitjacket, you can't build a second home for mum and dad as they age, you can't help your kids get a start in life, and you can't house farm workers to attract staff and keep your business viable. You may even be forced to remove mature trees when a perfectly suited open space is available somewhere else on the same lot. Why? Because some bureaucratic council or statewide policy has decided one house is enough, even on 100 acres, unless it is attached to the main dwelling, for reasons unknown and by the force of habit, because it's always been that way. I'd quickly like to say that I'd like to congratulate this chamber on the collaborative nature in which they have approached amending the terms of reference established in this inquiry. In short, the amendments have my full support. They will enhance rather than hinder the inquiry, and for that I'm grateful. I'd also like to thank the Minister for Planning, the Honourable Paul Scully, and his staff for their assistance in this matter. The Libertarian Party is not an oppositionist party that automatically opposes the government. Because of that, the planning minister in this government is our favourite minister. I've even heard a rumour that, given his staunch support for private property rights, that he's on a shortlist for the Libertarian of the Year. Let me highlight what this instrument would do, although I'm running out of time here, Madam Acting President. Can I have an extension shortly?
You can ask the House.
Okay. Thank you.
An extension of time has been requested. Is that granted? Yes.
Let me highlight what this instrument would do. It would allow a second home in a rural block, detached or attached, bigger, smaller, whatever suits the family in whichever location on the property is best suited to the new home. It would legalise dual occupancy without forcing people to subdivide, meaning you can keep the family intact. It would open the door to affordable multi-generational living without costing the taxpayer a cent. It would streamline approvals, offering a complying development certificate pathway instead of begging the local council for permission. In fact, it would continue to help councils supply local infrastructure through Section 712 levies, a win-win, Madam Acting President. Now, some may say, but what about floods or bushfire risk? This instrument doesn't throw out such controls. It's built on evidence-based risk criteria, but the inquiry will look into these as well. And for those worried about agricultural land being swallowed, this policy includes zone-specific standards to protect agricultural productivity. In fact, in peri-urban councils facing urban sprawl pressures like Hawkesbury, this may act as a bulwark against the more intensive greenfield developments which can be undesirable to those communities. This draft instrument encourages second dwellings without fragmentation. Councils suffer inertia, store reforms, apply blanket bans and use one-size-fits-all rules that choke sensible development. Even where council staff want to approve sensible new approaches, they find themselves hogtied by obscure and relic rules. We need freedom for property owners to use their land in the manner of their choice. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Nathan Zamprogno of the Hawkesbury City Council, who's been very helpful in formulating this initiative, and Councillor Mark Hornshaw, who's a Libertarian councillor at the Port Macquarie Hastings Council, who helped us come up with this idea. And I'd also like to thank the Honourable Ross Cameron, who's in the crowd, in the audience, the former Assistant Treasurer of Australia, who has helped facilitate this project which has got to this point. So I commend the motion. Thank you.
The Honourable Jeremy Buckingham.
Thank you very much. I would like to lead for the Legalised Cannabis Party on this issue. And commend the honourable member for an excellent and overdue idea in this state, because there is one thing that we have in this country, plenty of, an abundance of, that should not be at an exorbitant price, and that is our land. Our land, the price of land in this country, it should be far cheaper. And if we were to enable our rural and regional communities to better develop that land, to bring that land to market through this type of reform, we could make significant inroads into the housing crisis in this state, create economic development in some of the areas that desperately need it, and create an opportunity for more housing in places that are suffering from housing and especially rental stress. As a former Orange City councillor, for my sins, I was always alarmed that the rural zoning allowed farmers and the holders of that land the opportunity to develop that land and build a second dwelling, but they could not subdivide it, so they didn't do it. They had the infrastructure there. They've got the road, the power, the water and the like there, but they don't go out and build that property because they can't subdivide it because of draconian planning laws that are out of date, because that it's going to alienate the productivity and create of agricultural land and create a competition between that urban development and that agricultural enterprise. But that's ridiculous. The vast majority of rural zoning is pasture land, it's grazing land, a lot of it's very low productivity, and farmers and the holders of that land would rush into this development. It would lead to tens of thousands of new houses, economic development in the regions if we were to follow the path that the Libertarian Party are proposing. It's an excellent idea. I myself have raised it with the Planning Minister, an opportunity to create housing in places that desperately need it. Some of our regional areas are experiencing the same sort of housing and rental pressures that the city are. People being moved out, forced out of regional areas because they can't get the housing they need. This is a great idea to build the housing in the places where you need it and to provide economic development in the regions and the housing we desperately need. I commend the motion to the House.
Further speakers. Miss Sue Higginson.
The Greens don't oppose establishing this select committee to examine reforms for second dwellings in rural zones. I might say, in many rural zones, in particular LGAs, this is already happening. In Lismore, we already have these provisions. We know there's a real and pressing need for flexible housing options in rural and regional New South Wales. Many families want to support ageing parents, keep young people on the land, or provide affordable options for the next generation. At the same time, we must be clear about the exceptional risks to biodiversity that come with poorly regulated development in rural areas. Rural New South Wales is home to some of our most important and vulnerable ecosystems. Inappropriate or rush planning reforms can fragment habitat, increase pressure on threatened species, and undermine the resilience of our landscapes. We also can't ignore the extraordinary contradiction that we're seeing right now, say in Northern Rivers, for example. In the midst of a housing crisis, the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority is acting on the wishes of Premier Chris Minns and has just today boarded up safe and livable homes and has had others demolished. So I would have preferred this inquiry, as the honourable member who is bringing this motion, to have been undertaken by Portfolio Committee number 7, the most orderly professional committee of the House, which already has carriage of planning matters. That would have avoided creating an additional select committee and prevented unnecessary duplication of work for our hard-working committee staff. We've seen this work before. In 2013, the Lismore City Council, led by then Mayor Jenny Dow, worked very closely with the community to allow farmers in RU1 zones to build a second detached dwelling. It gave older farmers the options to stay on their land, it allowed families to live close by and support each other, and it was done with careful planning conditions so that agricultural use was not compromised. Importantly, it was developed from the ground up, with the state giving effect to locally driven reform. Madam President, I move that the question be amended by 1, omitting paragraph 1D and inserting instead D, the suitable interaction between the housing SEP and or code SEP, and provisions in local environmental plans under section 3.28 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. 2, in paragraph 1H, omitting to eliminate merit-based assessment and inserting instead and their interaction with merit-based assessment. 3, omitting to C and inserting instead C, 2 crossbench members being Mr Ruddick and Ms Higginson. And with those amendments and the contribution that I have made, we can support. Yeah, I think it's been circulated. This is, so with carefully community-driven reform, we can achieve the balance.
The member's time has expired. Before I call the next speaker, I don't suggest anyone's being disorderly, but there are a number of conversations that are at kind of a bit more than murmur, and it's just making it a bit hard, I suspect, probably for Hansard as well. So if we could just either keep it down or take it out, that'd be appreciated. Next, the Honourable Scott. Oh, sorry. Yes, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy President. On behalf of the Government, I rise to speak briefly in relation to this motion proposing the establishment of the Select Committee and its terms of reference. The Government is happy to support this proposed Select Committee inquiry and the proposed terms of reference. I understand that the opposition, and it looks like there's broad support in the chamber, which is good. The Government wishes to place on record the appreciation of to the Honourable John Ruddick for working with the Office of the Minister for Planning and Public Spaces in productive discussions on the proposed terms of reference before putting the motion to the House. I would make the point in the general context of the debate that the planning system and standard instrument already contains an optional clause 5.5 for planning controls relating to secondary dwellings on land in rural zones, enabling councils to elect maximum floor area controls and the maximum distance between the principal and secondary dwelling. Councils establish these planning controls for rural zones based on general subdivision patterns and infrastructure servicing within rural areas. Some LGAs permit secondary dwellings in rural zones and have applied the optional standard instrument controls 5.4 for floor area and distance controls. The protection and enhancement of rural towns and villages should also be considered, particularly whether permitting secondary dwellings in rural zones will have an impact on this principle, as well as demand for infrastructure should secondary dwellings be permitted. And of course, current and future land-based natural hazards and environmental impacts are all very important considerations. Again, in the context of this debate, the government notes any proposal to expand the complying development pathway for secondary dwellings to include rural and conservation lands will require careful consideration to ensure the rural and conservation values of the lands are not compromised through development. For instance, impact on primary production. Secondary dwellings newly permitted through the CDC process without any limitation on size may be inconsistent with the land use objectives and the productive capacity of rural lands. Any review should consider land use conflicts and potential impacts to rural activities, supply chains and agriculture. Similarly, impacts on conservation lands, second dwellings newly permitted through the CDC process on conservation lands may be inconsistent with the objectives of conservation zones and result in adverse environmental impacts. The government is, however, satisfied that all of these and other issues will be thoroughly examined during the public inquiry with the agreed terms of reference in a balanced manner by stakeholder submissions and by evidence of the witnesses. There will be many strong views presented to the Select Committee during this public inquiry. Good luck to those that are going to be on it. The government looks forward to these views and the evidence presented. The government will, as it does with all committee reports, consider the findings and recommendations once the Select Committee is published. And again, thanks to the Honourable John Ruddick for engaging positively with the government on the drafting of the terms of reference. And just in short, the government will not be opposing Ms Higginson's amendment.
The Honourable Scott Farlow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I rise on behalf of the opposition to also support the inquiry of the Honourable John Ruddick and the amendment of Ms Sue Higginson with respect to that inquiry. I think, as we've heard from members around the chamber, everybody is in support of the intentions of what the Honourable John Ruddick is trying to do here, which is create more housing in regional areas and on rural land. We have, of course, seen, and I think the Honourable Jeremy Buckingham was talking about the issue with the housing crisis in rural and regional New South Wales as well. Funnily enough, I was actually meeting with a stakeholder today from Bellingen about the housing crisis that exists there, and we often get caught up in thinking about the city and about the need for housing in the city, which is of course essential, but it can even be more stark in some regional areas because there are far less options that exist. But there are also, as the Honourable John Ruddick is identifying with this inquiry and with this motion, there are options as well. Now, those options may not be a housing estate. They may be a secondary dwelling. They may be a tiny house. They may be caravans that are put onto properties as well. And all of these, of course, are opportunities to be able to increase housing supply in our regions. One of the things we've seen in recent years post-COVID is, of course, that when it comes to property prices, yes, they've increased dramatically in the city, but they've also increased dramatically in the regions. In some cases, they've increased more dramatically in the regions. And that has, of course, created acute problems for regional communities where incomes, of course, have not risen anywhere near as much. So there needs to be alternatives on the table, and no doubt this is what this inquiry will be looking at. With respect to the wonderful, powerful PC7, I think we might actually have the same composition of the committee constituted perhaps as PC7, but maybe just with a different chair. It might be a swap, and maybe you can be the deputy chair. I might even nominate straight away just so you can take the John Ruddick position on PC7. But I have a feeling that all members will be coming to this inquiry with good intentions and goodwill and be looking to work through some of the issues as raised by the Minister. And not for a second do I think that everyone across regional New South Wales will be embracing this. I know with every idea that there are many supporters, but there will be detractors as well, and no doubt we will encounter that through the inquiry. But we will hopefully come to good resolutions and good recommendations that all members will come to with goodwill and work constructively with to give the government a good blueprint as to what we can do with rural and regional housing and secondary dwellings. And I commend the Honourable John Ruddick for bringing this motion to Select Committee.
Thank you. Minister Jackson.
Madam Deputy President, I just wanted to rise to indicate my real enthusiasm for this inquiry, and I also thank the Honourable John Ruddick for bringing it as a question to be considered by members of this House. I am obviously unambiguously in favour of supply, and for me a dwelling is a dwelling, and that is not just a freehold, freestanding house, new dwelling, of which I am in favour of. I'm in favour of build to rent, affordable rentals, owned by institutional or others investors, which are available on the rental market, and secondary and other dwellings on established properties. And he is absolutely right. I mean, if you want to describe the New South Wales planning system as Byzantine, try comparing council by council regulatory frameworks for the delivery of secondary dwellings on land. I have had a little bit of engagement in this with people who have been enthusiastic to do these kind of secondary dwellings in their LGAs and have just come up against an absolute wall of regulatory complexity. And so if this is an opportunity for us to try and move through that and standardise some of that with a framework that, I mean, it's not about making everyone happy. I mean, this is the art of the possible here. We're not here to make absolutely everyone happy. We're here to confront the issues facing the state, and the exodus of young people and the next generation from New South Wales, in particular from our regional areas, is of real concern. So I'm very enthusiastic about this work and the recommendations of this committee. I think that they will have to look at the approach of local government. There is a lot to do there, and the state government should play more of a role standard setting for local government. I think it's not just about permanent secondary dwellings. There are a range of organisations in rural and regional New South Wales who, as the Honourable Scott Farlow said, have talked about using small, tiny homes or other forms of temporary and transitional housing for people who might otherwise have experiences of homelessness. Again, this is something we should be embracing. If landowners are willing to have those kind of temporary or transitional homes on their dwellings, small pods for people in particular communities to wrap arms around them and look after them, that's a really interesting opportunity as well. All of this can be captured in the committee. I mean, the main reason I have to support this is Homes New South Wales is doing this. The modular housing program that I talk about in this house all the time is starting with secondary dwellings on the large blocks of land that we own. We have identified this opportunity and are working through that complexity in a very, very time-consuming way. And so it's important to me to recognise we think this is very important work and love the idea of a committee of this House providing some recommendations to us about how we can streamline and make this easier. So thanks to the mover and support the motion.
Thank you. Further speakers? The Honourable Natasha McLaren-Jones.
Thank you very much. I just want to briefly lend my support to this motion as well. I think it's a good idea to actually start having those conversations, particularly from a rural and regional point of view. There's some amazing councils out there that are working with local communities, working with charities, working with property owners to look at ways to be flexible. And I think by getting those people in, having those conversations, it does provide advice, assistance to government to look at more opportunities. So I commend the motion.
Mover in reply.
Thank you, Madam Acting President. So it feels like the atmosphere is good and we're off to a good start. And we do pass many motions and bills in this place, but I think that this is one that will very seriously impact hundreds of thousands of people in a positive way. So I'd like to thank the Honourable Jeremy Buckingham for his enthusiastic support and telling us about his lived experience at the Orange Council. I'm pleased to hear that Sue Higginson from the Greens is reasonably enthusiastic about it, and I take on board her concerns about biodiversity impacts. I'm generally confident that landowners will be aware of where there is biodiversity that needs to be protected, but I do agree, and it sounds like you're enthusiastic to be on the committee, and you'll be very, very welcome. I'd also like to thank Penny Sharp, and I do agree that there are lots of, this does sound good at the conceptual level, but there are lots of nitty-gritty details, and that's why this will be a helpful inquiry. I was happy to hear that the Honourable Scott Farlow sounds like he's willing to be on it, because I have been very impressed working with Scott on PC7, because I think he used to be a local councillor and he knows a lot about these issues. And I'd also very much like to thank the Honourable Rose Jackson. Now, very often the Minister and I have, most often we have very acute differences, but on the few occasions that we agree, we don't just agree, we enthusiastically agree. So that is always encouraging. And I'd also like to thank one of my oldest friends in politics, Natasha McLaren-Jones, for her support. So I commend the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. We're considering private members' business number 2218, moved by the Honourable John Ruddick Ruddick, to which Ms Sue Higginson has moved an amendment, the details of which have been circulated. We'll put the amendment first. The question is that the amendment of Ms Sue Higginson be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We'll now move the substantive motion as amended. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.